Alright, this is Chat UTD. I must confess, in years gone by, since Ferguson retired, when it's been looking like the end of a managerial reign and the potential for a new manager to come in, I personally have felt at least some kind of reinvigoration that the next person could be the one that we stumble across that could be the catalyst for change, because a manager is obviously a prevalent position at a football club, and there were times, particularly in the first half of the time that Ferguson's not been here, when I really welcomed a managerial change, and as I say, I felt quite uplifted by it. I felt like maybe this was a positive thing. With the noise surrounding Amorim at the moment, I have to say it feels really different. I think his time at United, if it hasn't already, it will run its course quite soon. But I really have very little optimism that that's going to make that much of a significant change, because we just don't get a bounce even from managers anymore. And I want to look at the problems beyond Ruben Amorim and the people running the club, particularly focusing on INEOS. And when they first came in, I said when INEOS first came in, I said that they would need to go through a 3-stage process to get United back to the top. I didn't think they could do it, but I outlined what those 3 stages were, and I want to revisit that and look at whether we're even in any of those stages now, because I assumed those stages would be an upward trajectory. So stage 1, which I thought would take 2 to 3 seasons, would be a levelling out process, that you clear the decks of the bad eggs in the squad, that you start to attract a certain type of player, that you start to establish your ethos at the club. There's something of a DNA, there's something of a clear vision of what you want in terms of a style of play. You have likeable players, you start to bring some young players through, you get more right than you get wrong, you get your feet under the table, and the team perhaps finishes around 5th, 6th in the table pretty consistently, and we look like a decent team going in the right direction. To give you a reference point for those people that will remember it, I'd say the 90 to 91 season under Ferguson, where we won the Cup Winners' Cup and we reached the League Cup final, and I think we finished 6th. We weren't a team that could win the league at that point. We were a little bit off the top teams, but we were starting to see chinks of light that this could be going somewhere, and that a team was forming that could move us in the right direction. That sort of feeling, that vibe. Feel good factor around the club, trophy here or there, things start to move in the right direction. That would be stage 1, 2 to 3 years. Next would be stage 2, which would be finishing in the top three for a couple of seasons in a row, maybe 2 or 3 seasons in a row. A very clear, defined way of playing, front foot, attacking football, the crowd arriving at Old Trafford in anticipation of watching an attractive football team, young players, a particular profile of player becoming quite established at United, as in, like, we know what type of players we're going to go for, we know what the style of play is, it almost supersedes whoever the manager is. We've got a very clear way. We're doing well in Europe when we're in it, we're getting into the latter stages of cup competitions, and there's a feeling this is a serious competitive football club. Maybe not quite winning titles, but right up there challenging in the top 3 or 4 season in, season out for a couple of 2 or 3 seasons, as I say. So that would be stage 2. And the final stage, which I predicted would take 6 to 7 years if it was to happen at all, would be us being right back at the top. The expectation being that you're competing for titles season in, season out. You might have the odd season where you're not, but that's the expectation. And Champions League is a bare minimum expectation. You're doing well in the Champions League when you're in it. We're right back at the top. Now, I very quickly said, I don't think we'll ever get to stage 3 under this ownership structure. I've since revised it, and I would say I don't think we're ever going to get to stage 2 under this ownership structure. I think we might have the odd season over a period of time where we get in the top 3 or 4, but I don't think it's going to be a constant upward trajectory where we then end up right at the summit again. And I don't see us consistently finishing in the top 3 or 4. Why would you think that at the moment? would just be blind faith, wouldn't it, I suppose? So I asked myself, where are we in terms of those stages now? We're not in any of those stages. You could say in terms of the criteria for stage 1, they have cleared the decks a little bit in terms of some of the bad eggs at the club. They have got their feet under the table. They have made some unpopular decisions, I suppose, but nonetheless they've made their mark a little bit in terms of cost cutting and saving the club some money. But in terms of that criteria of getting chinks of light, attractive football, a team that we can all get behind, looking like we're going to finish top 5, 6, we're not anywhere near that. And this weekend, for the first time, it dawned on me. I always assumed that INEOS would take us on an upward trajectory, even if it took some time. I actually worry now that what we're doing is going on a downward trajectory, that they're going to take it, they're going to see us oversee a decline. And maybe there's 3 stages to that, and maybe that's what we're in. So stage 1, the levelling out process, rather far from it being a levelling out as in moving up, it's a levelling out as in we're a mid-table to lower end Premier League team. The expectations flatline, no one really expects an awful lot. We maybe save some money, we do some bare basic stuff around the club that makes us a bit more efficient in terms of the bottom line, but on the pitch, we're a mid-table, lower end Premier League club. That would be stage 1. Stage 2 might be we start having to fight relegation battles. Stage 3 could be you get relegated. I think we're just as much more likely to be on, if we look at it like this, and that's the upward trajectory and that's the downward trajectory, we could be here. We could be in stage 1 of a downward trajectory here. I certainly don't think we're in stage 1 of the upward trajectory. And like I said before, I don't see us getting to stage 2. I thought last season when Amorim came in, I said it on here, the club had from December, Christmas 2023 until when they appointed Amorim, let's be generous and call that a fact-finding few months, establishing yourselves, an assessment period, essentially, a review of everything that's going on, a strategic review as they called it. And that Amorim signified the start of stage 1 because it's their first appointment. Let's be generous and say maybe stage 1 starts from the appointment of Amorim. I don't think it did. I think stage 1, you have to include all that fact-finding stuff, but let's be generous. So that was nearly a year ago. I said I think stage 1 would take 2 or 3 seasons. We're a year into Ruben Amorim. There is no sign whatsoever that this team, this club under INEOS, is going in an upward trajectory at all. It would take someone with an awful lot of faith to say that in the next 2 or 3 seasons, we're going to be a team that fulfills that criteria that I mentioned for stage 1. Amorim came in to remedy the problems of a manager who finished 8th. And in a year, we've regressed 7 places. He took us to, the rest of that season, he took us to 15th. He was there to remedy Ten Hag, who finished 8th the season before. And it was looking like we was probably going to finish in a similar position again. And last season we finished 15th. That's quite a regression. And this is what I'm talking about. INEOS appointed Amorim. And since INEOS have come in, we've gone from don't forget, when INEOS first came in and took the football reins of the club, the season prior to that we'd finished 3rd. The second half of that season, when they first came in, was awful. You can't blame them too much for that, but nonetheless, I'm just looking at what's happened since they've come in. We won the FA Cup, but we finished 8th. Last season, they sacked Ten Hag, which was the right thing to do. They bring Amorim in, and we finished 15th. So I said, a couple of years ago, this doesn't work. This INEOS thing doesn't make sense. They haven't. If we want to get back to the top, if that's the success criteria, they haven't got enough money to do it. They haven't got the experts that they're bringing in, the expertise to do it. They've got no track record in football. We're a club loaded with debt. The Glazers are still there. The legacy damage is is there and is continued to being added to by the Glazers. We have all kinds of financial restrictions placed upon us because of poor operation in the market over a period of time. There is all manner of different things which meant we were swimming against the tide. And what I said at the time was, for us even to be competitive again under INEOS, they would have to make sure they got every single decision right, because there's so many factors against us. So their decision making has to be absolutely spot on. And that's, you're never going to get everything right, but you're going to have to get the vast majority of things right. And if I'm even being pragmatic about it, I'd say they've got a mixed record at best, which I think needs to be scrutinised. If you're going to make decisions like going through the club with like a dose of salts, getting rid of staff that have been there for a long time, you might say, okay, the workforce was inflated, overinflated, perhaps it was, but nonetheless, unpopular decisions you've made there. You're cutting the ties with local charitable foundations and such. You're cutting your funding to an ex-players association. You're putting the season ticket prices up. You're taking tickets off people that have had them for 30 or 40 years and essentially making it a ticket that day trippers can take, and you can charge much more money for it. You're making it difficult for young fans to go. You're making it difficult for the older fans to go. You're making it difficult for Joe Punter fan to go in general. If you're going to do all that, then me personally as a fan, I want to see some evidence that it's worth it. I want to see some evidence that all those decisions you're making are starting to bear fruit. And I'm sorry, whether it's early days or not, I'm seeing nothing in that respect. I'm seeing perhaps the bottom line might look a little bit better. I'm seeing that the club might be a little bit more efficient financially. But on the pitch, which is where a football team and a football club should be judged, it's as bad as it gets. And I don't see any chinks of light. I see no shoots of recovery. And I'm not at all sure that they will make decisions to remedy this situation, even if they were to get rid of Ruben Amorim. So I think at the moment, United look like they're a team, a club in decline, and that's what they're overseeing. They're overseeing the decline of Manchester United, not the rebirth or the, an upward trajectory. Like I said in my last video, at some point or other, we'll be in a phase of foundation building and we won't realise we're in it, and it's going to lead to something that right at that moment you won't believe is possible. But I don't think that's now. I don't think that's what's happening now. And I go back to what I said. They haven't got enough money. They haven't got the right people through the door. They've got no history of success in football. The Glazers are still there. The legacy damage is still there. The debt is still there. We're hampered by FFP and all those types of things. None of that, I've not been convinced that any of that is a bridgeable gap to get to where we want to get to. So in terms of what they do with the manager, you've got Steve Howson, who some people might have heard of, a guy on YouTube, United fan, the type of person who's very, very supportive of managers. For me, at times, I think he's a bit of an apologist for the regime in terms of the Glazers and well, more INEOS than the Glazers, to be fair. But I'd say, for my liking, overly patient. And he's saying yesterday, Amorim will absolutely get sacked, and rhyming off a list of reasons as to why. If he's saying he's going to get sacked and he should be sacked, then you're in trouble, because he'd back anyone. So I think everyone knows it's happening at some point soon. Going back to what I said at the start of the video, normally that would lead to some flutter of excitement or curiosity as to what we're going to do next. And it is interesting to talk about it and speculate about who it might be and who, if and when it happens, the next person that comes in, we've got someone different to talk about. But realistically, do any of us really truly believe that we're going to go anywhere with this ownership structure. That's the more pressing conversation to have. The club needs a catalyst. I said the team needs a catalyst on Saturday after doing my post-match reaction. The team needs a scrappy win, or just by hook or by crook, put two or three wins together, and you start to view yourselves differently. The club needs a catalyst. The owners aren't going anywhere. All of the issues that I've already said twice are still there, so I'm not going to go into it again, but all of those issues are still there. It is what it is. So if you look at, right, well, what potentially could be a catalyst, it would be a change of manager. But we've got to be realistic as to how far that will go. We need a stage one manager. And what a proper club does, if they're going through those stages on an upward trajectory that I mentioned before, is stage one, they'll have a certain type of manager who will establish that stage one. And then as you start to look towards stage two, you say, we're going to sack that manager, not because they're really bad or the rubbish or anything like that, but just because you go, you've done your job, you've done what I've asked you to do, but I don't think you're quite capable of taking us to stage two, so now we're going to get a manager who is. And you get them in. And then maybe you change it again if you want to go all the way to the top. I think gone are the days that a manager will take a club from where we are to winning titles. And I see people say, they look at the list of managers that are out there that we potentially could get, and they say, well, they're not going to take us back to the top. I don't think that's the criteria for success anymore. INEOS, over their time so far, in the 2 years that they've been there, have overseen quite a rapid and alarming decline, where we are now 15th. We got a manager to remedy 8th, who's taken us to 15th. So now we need a manager who can remedy 15th and get us into stage one, which is, as I say, top 5, top 6. You still need a decent manager to do that. You jump in 9 places from where we finished last season. But will Oliver Glasner lead United back to the glory days of winning titles again? I highly doubt it. But I don't think that's the success criteria. So I think we have to be a little bit pragmatic about what we're aiming for here, because the club's in an absolute mess. Ultimately, I want those glory days back. They're not going to happen with this ownership structure. We are way down the mountain in terms of trying to reach that summit. We need someone who's an expert at getting you the first part of the way, in overseeing improvement. And that's why the list is Glasner, the guy from Bournemouth, and Southgate. Because they have history of doing what I've just suggested needs to be done. The best managers out there don't want this job, and probably wouldn't do very well in it anyway, because they're not working with the tools that they would need to work with. So I think Oliver Glasner's the favourite, but your issue you've got with him is that he's at Crystal Palace, where I think they're an underdog club. In London, they're seen probably as the cheeky little upstart comparative to Chelsea, Tottenham, Arsenal, those so-called bigger clubs in London. They've got a tight ground where there's quite a partisan atmosphere. They've probably got a really tight-knit dressing room where it's one for all for one for all. You've got that spirit, you've got that almost nothing to lose type mentality where any progress is seen as a massive success and a massive success and a massive high. And with that criteria, Oliver Glasner's done brilliantly well at Crystal Palace and deserves great credit for that. But you come to United, and whilst we do need a stage one manager and somebody who can, I don't think we're expecting anyone to take us to league titles and such, it's a very different environment. You've got 76,000 people. You've got the ghosts of the past. You're standing on the shoulder of giants. In the very recent past, we've been very, very successful. You have the pundits in the studio who were part of that very recent past. And even if we accept that we need to move into a not spectacular realm by going into that stage one, the pressure on that manager from minute one is very different to what it would be like at Crystal Palace. The dressing room's very different. I think the feeling around the dressing room would be very different. And whilst you could say that Man United are underdogs at the moment, I don't think that'll ever be truly accepted by anyone. So we're not judged on underdog standards by the wider media, and the noise very quickly gets very loud around a manager that doesn't do what's expected of them. That's not to say they get sacked quickly, because I don't think they do at United. But that's the difference. We've seen it with players. Doing it at Crystal Palace absolutely should give you the right to expect to move up a level. And Crystal Palace are a better team than Man United, but they're not a better club. Well, they're not a bigger club, let's put it that way. It would be seen as a step up to go to Manchester United. But people can't always make that jump. And has that manager then got the tools around them to be able to be successful? As I've said before with INEOS, so far the evidence suggests no, because they're not even in stage one of a 3-stage process that clearly needs to happen if we were going to be successful. And I appreciate it take time, but we're not even stage one of it. And that's why I don't think Southgate's as absurd as some people think he is. I don't think it would fill me with excitement, no. But I feel like because it's so against the grain, in some way you're almost creating an underdog narrative where we're thinking we're absolutely screwed now, we've got Southgate. A lot of United fans would feel like that anyway. But could it almost be so bizarre it would work better? I don't know. That's very flawed logic, I'm well aware of it, but I don't know what does work. So he could come in and it's a disaster. He could come in and do all right. Odds against it, but he could come in and do pretty well. But I think that's the same for anyone. And that's what I mean, as I said at the start of the video. I'm not excited anymore when I think, all right, new managers coming in, let's see what they're all about. There's a bit of that. Because there's always the chance that that next one could be the one that is the catalyst, could be the trigger to just push us further up. You know what? And I'm going to end on this. When Ollie came in, I think he was a very good stage 1 manager. Well, actually, you could call him a stage 2 manager, actually, because we were regularly finishing. He was the only manager since Ferguson that's got a consecutive Champions League finishes. So maybe I'm doing him a disservice. Maybe he was a stage 1 and 2 manager. But he was never going to be a stage 3 manager that won you titles. And the club missed a trick in that when we finished second and lost the final to Villarreal, far from it being that was then the prelude to Solskjaer going the next step and winning a title with us, if you know your football, you go, that's as good as it's going to get under him. It's reached his ceiling. And you bring in an expert operator, a Conte or someone of that ilk at that stage and say, we've not sacked him because he's done terribly. We've sacked him because he's done what we asked him to do. The next person needs to take us to a level we don't think Solskjaer can take us to. So you bring in a winner. Don't be afraid to do things like that. But the club's got no foresight. It's got no football knowledge. And now we find ourselves in a position where it's just from there, it's just gone down. We obviously had the high of finishing third with Ten Hag. But since INEOS have come in, as I said, it's been on a downward trajectory. So this is it's another crossroads moment. You know, are we really going to start stepping into that stage 1 and moving that upward trajectory, or are we in stage 1 of a downward trajectory? Genuine question. Okay, close this out.